I just saw The Brutalist, and boy, do I have a lot to say. Not really angry, just a lot to say about The Brutalist. So, The Brutalist is a movie that I think far few people would be talking about if the director and the studio, which was A24, which you may know where I'm going with this, if they didn't try to be very particular and say, we're going to put this movie out in 35 millimeter, we're going to put it out in 70 millimeter, and we're going to put it out in IMAX, and we shot it in VistaVision, which means nothing to 99.9% of the people anymore, but they keep putting VistaVision up front and everything. And what VistaVision was, to the best of my limited knowledge, was it was a film format, it was a shooting technique, at least, back in predominantly like in the 50s in America. Paramount, I believe, had VistaVision. And what it was I believe it was the deal was the camera moved through the film moved through the camera horizontally, I believe. And it was a higher resolution way to shoot a film. And I believe there was a way to, I think there was a way to project them in VistaVision as well. I'm not 100% on that, but it was a way of shooting things that supposedly, it was called VistaVision Motion Picture High Fidelity, and it was supposed to create a sharper picture. It went away a long, long time ago, probably the 50s, and for whatever reason, the director of The Brutalist, who is Brady Corbet, decided to revive VistaVision for this movie, and I really don't understand why. The film, honestly, I saw this, I was curious. If something comes out on film, it's a little cooler to see it that way, it's a little more unusual to see it that way, but it really kind of only makes sense if it was shot on film, and I don't know if this film was, or if the film has a negative that was struck and you strike from that to get that maximum quality. If a film is shot digitally, it's not necessarily going to look better because you're seeing it on celluloid. It's more of a gimmick. It's more of a particular thing to do. And I was thinking about trying to see this in 70 millimeter. If you don't know, 70 millimeter twice as wide as 35 millimeter, so theoretically twice as sharp. It was a prestige film format for a long time. It was really saved for higher end films, for roadshow presentations, for epics and spectacles for the most part. And it existed up into the early 80s. It existed, I believe I saw a print of Terminator 2 that was 70 millimeters. So it at least went to like the very early 90s, but it fell out of favor because it just wasn't, theaters weren't equipped to show it anymore, and it was just added bulk and expense, and they stopped doing it. So once in a while, somebody will revive that. I believe Tarantino revived that. Somebody said there was a recent print of Boogie Nights in 70 millimeter, even though it wasn't shot in 70 millimeter. There's a 70 millimeter print of Brutalist. So I wanted to see it that way. I couldn't see it that way. I wound up seeing it in IMAX, and I thought it honestly did not look very good. It's shot sort of not square, but it's not super widescreen, which to me is always a weird choice these days. It also, to me, is just being particular. I'm going to be difficult and shoot a movie square because 0 screens are square in the world anymore. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm the guy who, I want to see everything in the proper aspect ratio. If I got to see black bars on the sides of my screen because a film was shot in 1940, I'm cool with that. And if I have to see horizontal bars on my screen because a film was shot 239 or something, I'm totally cool with that too. But to intentionally shoot something square just doesn't make any sense to me anymore. It doesn't make sense. So anyway, The Brutalist. What is this movie about? 3 minutes into this review, The Brutalist is about the story of an immigrant coming to America in just around the World War II time and trying to find his footing and survive and thrive in this foreign to him country. That foreigner is Adrien Brody. We learn that he has fled persecution. He has fled, I believe it was, I want to say it was Hungary, but I'm probably wrong. Eastern Europe. He fled Eastern Europe as the Nazis were taking over and exterminating people of his kind. And he settles up. I'm not going to tell you the whole story. He settles up with a cousin, I believe, in a furniture shop. We learn that Adrien Brody was an architect of some renown in his home country, and he is eventually hired by Guy Pearce, who plays a gruff but lovable rich guy, to design a community center, a community ode to his mother. And it's this struggle between Adrien Brody trying to stay true to what he wants and American economics getting involved and people wanting to cut corners. At the same time, Adrien Brody is trying to get his wife and his orphaned niece, who are still trapped at the border overseas, who have survived either the concentration camps or something very close to that, trying to get them to come to America to be safe with him and start a new life. So there's a lot of strife. There's a lot of artistic strife. There's a lot of interpersonal strife. And the movie is long. That's one of the things about The Brutalist. One of the things I really liked about The Brutalist is this is very rare. This is probably also A24 and the director being particular, but in this case, I'm really going to be on their side for it. This movie is 3.5 hours long. There's an intermission. Thank you. Movies that were long had intermissions for decades. It was just the way it worked. It gave people a chance to go to the bathroom and not miss anything. I get choked up when I talk about intermissions. And more importantly, it gave people a chance to go to the concession stand and buy more food, and food at the concession stand is the only way theaters make money. So I've sat through so many incredibly long movies these days. It's not unusual for what used to be a 90-minute popcorn movie to be 2.5 hours these days. Look at any Marvel movie, any sci-fi movie. They're damn long. And a lot of people don't go to the movies because they're so long, or they can't not take a bathroom break and have to miss it. Movies don't stop. Generally, if it's a good movie, there's always information in something that's moving the story forward, and you go to the bathroom or you go to get more food and you come back, you've missed something and you have to get caught up. Intermissions allow for that. We should have been having intermissions for quite a while now. I could understand the theoretical reason to not have intermissions, and that, if we stretch this out, we can't fit in another showtime. If a movie is 3.5 hours long, you're only going to play it so many times in the day. That 15 minutes is not going to make a difference. It's not going to mean, suddenly you can't show it again. It was great. And the intermission, for those who want to know, it's built in. The film, like they often used to, the film actually has an overture, but it's not really done the way it used to be done. It says on screen overture, and there's a little bit of music, but then it slips into the movie. The intermission, we get up to a point in the story, and then a photo comes up on screen, and then it says intermission, and there's a clock on screen that counts down. So you see you've got 15 minutes, which is perfect. I was able to go out, go to the bathroom, get some more food, which helps the theater, and then sit back down again and have like 2 minutes to spare. It was great, and it didn't hurt the story. It didn't interrupt the flow at all. It was what intermission should be. And I hope that theaters that are running The Brutalist see an uptick in concession sales, and I hope they tell studios, we really need these intermissions for these. Anything that's over 2.5 or at least 3 hours, we really need an intermission again. Anyway, so what did I think of The Brutalist? I thought it was okay. I don't understand the VistaVision 70mm, 35mm IMAX. It's not really shot particularly well. It's shot okay, but it's not a great looking movie. It's not terribly colorful. It's mostly people in conversations. It's like Hateful Eight was. Tarantino made this big deal about it being shot in Super Cinerama or whatever it was, certain kind of millimeter widescreen and all that, and it was people sitting in a room talking. Like you expected with Hateful Eight to see snowy vistas, and it was going to be like The Great Silence or something, and it wasn't. It was all indoors. And The Brutalist is kind of the same way. It's mostly interiors. There's some external shots here and there, but nothing that interesting, And even there's an opening shot of the Statue of Liberty, and it's so terribly shot at a weird, obtuse angle that makes no sense whatsoever, unless you're trying to get into the idea of brutalist architecture. And the opening and the end credits are like annoying. And I guess that's probably brutalism, but they scroll in such a way and they're laid out in such a way that it's just not pleasant to look at. And they have this big VistaVision thing, which again, just doesn't make any sense to me. And the end credits are done at like a diagonal. And again, I'm not going to give anything away about this. There's a lot of drama. There's some shocking moments that kind of bothered me because you're going along with this drama that's very interesting, and suddenly it's like, and there's heroin involved, and there's crude sex stuff involved, and there's gross physical assault involved, and there's all this stuff that I'm just like, okay, yeah, you're edgy, great, maybe you could. It turned me off after a while. There was so much like repulsive stuff that was injected into this. It might have been based on a real person. I'm hearing that maybe it was based on an actual architect or a couple, and they had these aspects of their lives, but it was just, I don't know, it was not that pleasant an experience overall to me. And eventually it does this weird thing where it sort of doesn't flash forward in time, but it flashes farther into the timeline of this character than I expected it would. And it's this big thing. And then it just kind of ends with a very strange musical choice, I thought. It kind of bugged me overall. So it's a very long movie. The large format, I don't think makes really a difference at all. I would say see this. If you want to see this, you should see it in a theater because there are aspects of it that really do work well on the big screen. But mostly it's an interpersonal drama about a very troubled person who makes very dumb choices repeatedly. And it really kind of wasn't for me. So it's the kind of movie that honestly, if it wasn't for the film format thing, I don't think many people would really be interested. This is an art house movie. This is not for normal people. This is not for mainstream people. If you really love Adrien Brody, he's in the whole thing. If you really love Felicity Jones, she's in the whole thing, or Guy Pearce or something like that. But otherwise, I don't know that I would. And it was all shot, I guess, in Hungary. It takes place, interestingly, in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. So while I was watching it, I'm like, if there's a movie theater in Doylestown, Pennsylvania that's showing this, and people go there and they don't know, there's going to be hooting and hollering because they mention Doylestown like every 10 minutes. But apparently the whole thing was shot in Hungary. There are some very egregious examples of what I call the faux American accent, where they hire somebody who's British or Australian to be an American. And I'm finally attuned to that, to my ear, the way they curl their R's or they go nasal with their accents and stuff. And it always bugs me. There's a couple actors who do that. And I guess it's more excusable if you're not shooting it here than if you are. Guy Pearce is flawless, but there's one guy who plays like a foreman or something, and I'm just like, he's clearly not from here. Anyway, The Brutalist.